Great. Great. Thank you very much for coming. I just want to check, can everyone hear me at the back, even if you sometimes can't see me through the pillar? Yes? Great. Thank you. Today I want to talk to you about how to design things that people actually want, as opposed to designing things that we spend a lot of time designing and developing but that people don't actually end up being bothered about. And this is about using a method called jobs to be done. So first I'd like to know among you, I know we've been talking a lot about jobs to be done under a different name over the past few years here. How many of you have feel familiar with jobs to be done? Great. And how many of you feel like they've read lots about it and they're a bit confused? Yes? How many of you feel like they really understand it inside out? Well, I didn't raise my hand either. So yeah, what I'm going to do is essentially I'm going to take you through the same talk that I gave at UX Scotland. It's a bit, if you don't mind, I would prefer if you kept questions for the end, simply because we're recording and I'd like to use the recording for all the new starters. There'll be lots of questions at the end. Of course, if I use some jargon or something, or a word is getting in the way of you understanding something, that it's my job to make it clear, please do stop me. But if you don't fully agree with something, I also want to hear about it, but at the end if possible. Sounds good? Great. So, it's not turning the pages for some reason. Let me try something. All right. So first I'd like to start by playing a little game with you. So I'm going to name a few situations and I'd like you to tell me whether you've ever been in a situation like this, okay? So the first situation is this. So you hear someone around you, or maybe your client, or maybe someone you work with say, we don't have time for user research or user testing because we need to build more features. Have you been in a situation like this? Yep, yep. And what about this one? Have you ever been in a situation where you hear this or that stakeholder preferred the previous designs? So let's all revert back to how things were before. Have you been in that situation? Yep. Have you, oh, that's it. So I think it's quite inevitable that some people that we work with won't understand or value user-centered design as much as we would like them to. And I think that's a good thing. We can't, you know, we all have different priorities and different skills, and it's a good thing that we care about different things and understand deeply different things. That's good. But I must say, I used to feel very frustrated by this. And I was quite afraid of situations like this. And I think the reason I was afraid of situations like this is because I didn't know how to handle them. I think that it's actually really on us to articulate our process and thinking more clearly so that we can actually bring along other people along with us. I think it's really on us, especially designers and anyone who does design strategy and product management. It's really on us to really articulate it and make it very, very simple for people to follow. But actually, that's quite hard. I'm sure you've seen, we struggle to articulate it sometimes, people struggle to follow it. Today I'm going to talk to you about jobs to be done, because jobs to be done is not a silver bullet that's going to replace all your other ways of thinking or methods to think about design or research or product management or strategy, but it's good at something. It's very good. It's pretty useful for for communicating and articulating user-centered design and bringing other people along with you on the process and really helping them understand why a better user experience or a difference will be more than just nice, but it will be the difference between them having a customer and them not having a customer. And in a nutshell, if I was to say just in one sentence, jobs to be done is just a powerful way of thinking that puts people's real situations of struggle and the outcomes that they're hoping for at the center of every conversation. So instead of having feature ideas or stakeholders' feature preferences at the center of every conversation, now you're going to have people's or users, what you believe your users' actual real situational struggles are, and what is it that they're hoping for in this situational struggle. And if you're new to jobs to be done, you could literally spend the next few weeks reading about it online, and you'd probably end up being quite confused. And there are lots of different reasons for this, but the term jobs to be done was coined around 2004 by Clay Christensen before he himself understood the theory really well. And it took him another 12 years to write a book that really explained it. And he said then, I didn't understand it at the time. So in a 12 years gap, a lot of people, in 12 years gap, the name and the method got really popular. And a lot of people started using their own methods and calling it the same name. So today, there are broadly two ways of doing jobs to be done. What I'm talking to you about today is the original vision, the way that the creators defined it, which I think is the most interesting and the newest. Everything else is also useful. If you hear your clients talk about jobs to be done, a bit like a jobs to be done is a task, it is useful. But I'm talking to you about something more subtle. It's slightly different from that. So it's useful to be aware of this. My goal today is to take jobs to be done and translate it without any jargon into plain language that you can use with your clients without even using the word jobs that confuse everyone. And I want to really boil it down to 2 simple ideas and 3 habits that you can use on your projects. And if you use these habits on your projects, you'll immediately notice a difference without needing to ask your clients or colleagues to learn a new method or change the way they think. So then what is jobs to be done in just 2 key ideas? The first idea of jobs to be done is that actually people don't actually want products, features, or services. What people want actually is to get from a situation of struggle that they're in to the outcomes that they're imagining. And that sounds a bit like abstract and fluffy, but let me tell you concretely what I mean. What I'm saying is that what happens is that people are sometimes in situations of struggle. And what I mean by this is, a situation where you might be stressed or worried or unhappy, dissatisfied or bored. And you don't really like that situation. You want something else. You want to get rid of these feelings. You want to get rid of the situation. And as you are in that situation, you're also imagining a different state of things, how things could be different. And what you're imagining, they're not features or products and stuff, they're a different set of outcomes. So people are in a situation of struggle, and as they're in that situation of struggle, they are imagining outcomes that they're hoping to achieve. Now, products, represented by this little arrow here, are literally, like products, services, and features are literally just one possible mechanism that they're hoping they could use to go from that situation of struggle to the outcomes that they're imagining. But the product or the service or the feature for them, for people, is quite secondary. It's not the stuff that matters the most. The stuff that is most real to people and most important to people is the struggle they're feeling and the difficult feelings that they're feeling and the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve. That's the first idea of jobs to be done, as simple as that. I just want to give you a more concrete example. It's taken from a real experience and something I've not told to some of you here. So if you hear me say, I want coffee, well, I'm not lying to you. Sometimes I say I want coffee, but actually there's a lot more going on than I'm actually telling you. So here's an example of a situation that happens to me quite often because my housemate plays video game late at night in the room just above me. So sometimes I'm here in the office, and this is my situation of struggle. I didn't sleep well last night. I'm struggling to focus and get motivated on the work that I'm supposed to be doing. And the more I procrastinate, the more anxious I feel and the more guilty I feel. Now, this is very real and vivid for me. I really want to get rid of that situation. And what I'm hoping to achieve is a few different outcomes. Concretely, what I'm really hoping will happen is that I manage to focus on my work, regardless of how I get there. I want my work to be done to good standards by 6 p.m. and I want to not be stressed this evening. Now, these outcomes are really, really important to me. These are the things that really matter to me. Now, when I'm in these situations, I've used a few different products or strategies at different times. So sometimes I get a coffee, but I've noticed that if I've already had 2 coffees on the same day, then the 3rd coffee doesn't actually help me focus better. It actually makes things worse. So sometimes the coffee just doesn't work. So when I can, in the summer, I would go to the park over there and have a nap on the grass. And that's my favorite method. But it's not always sunny and the grass is not always dry. So I can't use it all the time. When I can't have a nap, I would go somewhere and meditate. And 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I come back and I'm able to focus on things. Brilliant. But sometimes I feel like I don't really have enough time to do this. I just don't do that. So if I can't have a coffee, take a nap, or meditate, I would then try and delegate. And if I can't delegate, then I just revert to just procrastination. My point here is that I don't care about which of these methods I pick, really. What I really want is to not feel, to actually be out of the situational struggle, manage to focus on my work, be done with these difficult feelings. And this is the brief. So people don't actually want products, services, or features. What they really want instead is to get from a situational struggle that they're feeling and experiencing to outcomes that they're hoping to achieve. That was the first idea of jobs to be done. The second idea of jobs to be done is it's going to be a bit less obvious, but it's going to be really important. I think that's the important one. Focusing on feature ideas makes design hard. It really makes design very, very hard. Instead, focusing on the situational struggle that people are experiencing, that your potential users are experiencing, and on the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve, if you focus on these 2 things, then your design process is going to be way easier. And that's the key idea. Actually, when you focus on situational struggle and desired outcomes, as opposed to feature ideas, the design process at a high level is pretty simple to understand and to communicate. It actually boils down to 4 simple questions, 4 simple steps. The first step would be, okay, what are our customers? The first step would be to ask yourself, what are our customers' specific situations of struggle? And do whatever research to find that out, or if you can't do research, at least get aligned with everyone's going to have a say in the designs about why you believe the situational struggle are that your customers experience and that you aim to help with, and in what priority. That's your step number 1. Step number 2 is looking at the situational struggle. What outcomes are our potential users hoping to achieve when they are in this situational struggle? Then step number 3 is to ask yourself, well, what solutions, what things, products, services, strategies, behaviors are they currently using when they are in this situational struggle trying to achieve these outcomes? And I've listed a few earlier, my nap, my coffee, all these things. And once you know what solution they're currently using, your 4th step is to ask yourself, can we make that quicker? Can we make that easier or better in some ways that will to get from that situational struggle to the desired outcome? At a super high level, really simplifying, but these are the 4 questions I always have in my head when I design, and they're pretty easy to communicate to the client, and they're very helpful to structure any conversation, because generally when you're in a conversation about strategy or design with a client, you can notice that maybe this hasn't been clearly established, or maybe that, and you can really use these questions to reframe things for clients. So these are the two key ideas about jobs to be done. There are lots of others, but these are the two key fundamental, like, life-changing one. Now, what I'd like to do is to show you how to use jobs to be done in your day-to-day work, regardless of what you do, just by adopting 3 simple habits. You don't have to tell anyone you're doing it. You can just do it and it will make a difference immediately. So the first habit, I'm going to tell you about the first habit. So the first habit comes into play when you're in a particular situation. So have you ever been in a situation where you feel like everyone around you is starting from feature ideas? Like maybe a client comes to us and they already have a set of features they want to build, and maybe it doesn't entirely make sense to you, or maybe you're trying to prioritize feature ideas without really understanding user needs, or maybe you're briefed to design something and you're told what features there needs to be, but you don't really know what the needs are behind it. Has that ever happened to you? Well, what I'm suggesting is that when others around you are starting from feature ideas, when you notice that this is happening, we all do it. When you notice that this is happening, you can ask a question. You can ask, what situational struggle and desired outcomes are we designing for? It's a bit of a mouthful, but you can say, you can introduce people to the language and they start to get it and they go, okay, what situational struggle are we designing for? And it really helps clarify things and also identify where you should really be spending your time. I want to show you an example of this, how that simple question can really change your design process by taking an example from the Met Office. So when we started working with the Met Office a few years ago, when they came to us, initially our goal, what they told us they wanted to achieve was to create the best weather app out there. Better than Apple's weather app, better than BBC's weather app, better than AccuWeather, better than all of them. So quite naturally, with that sort of ambition, we looked at all the features that all these other weather apps were, building into their apps. And it was tricky because there were lots of quite advanced features, and we also needed to start somewhere. And what is it that's going to help us make a better weather app? And I must say, of course, everyone knows that it's not because you have all the features that all the other apps have that you're a better app. Of course, we know that. But I must say, I think that there was a sense of pressure, especially early engagement with the client, that there was a sense that we need to build just a lot of these features if we want to be successful in the market. The problem with that is that, oops, I skipped that. I'm not sure how to go back, by the way. The problem with that is that looking at all these feature ideas did not give us a sense of direction. We didn't know where to start. We didn't have a vision. It was really hard to organize the design process. It was really hard to prioritize anything. So instead, we reframed the brief. And at the end of the day, people, what they're looking for is not, all the weather app features. So what is it that people actually want? So we started doing some research, and we realized that a lot of the potential users were experiencing a situational struggle that's a lot like this. So I'm leaving home for the day. I'm in a rush. I need to be out of the door immediately. And I actually don't know what clothes or rain gear to take with me today. And also, that's a very important point. I'm going to be across several locations in the day. So that was a bit of a surprise for me because I used to wake up in Camden, walk here to King's Cross, same weather locale. But a lot of people wake up Ilford, work in London, commute in the evening to Oxford, or a lot of people across the country actually have to deal with different weather location in the same day. So in this situational struggle, what people were hoping to achieve was quite simple. They wanted to enjoy the day and stay dry, but very importantly, they wanted to be out of the door immediately because they were already late. What's really interesting is to look at what behaviors, what strategies people use, and then these behaviors and strategies will tell you what actually matters to them. So people could look at a weather app, but most of the time, most people would not do it because it would take too much time. Instead, they might just look at the sky and try and assess. Or they would maybe ask their partner or someone what the weather is going to be like. They might know or they might not know. Or very often they just do not think, do not, they'll just take a chance and go out. Just because they didn't, even looking at weather app was too much time. And that was a bit of a surprise for us because we thought, it'd be quite easy to design and develop something that make it incredibly quick and easy for someone when they need to get out of the door immediately, when they're going to be across several weather locations in the day, to know just what they need to know and need to be so quick they just do it every day. It turns out when we looked at Apple's weather app at the time, they didn't do that at all. It would give you the weather for 3 different locations at the same time, but that's never been useful to me because I'm yet to manage to be in 3 different locations at the same time. And then if you want to have a bit more detail about how it's going to be today in London, you have to tap on London, see how it is, remember, go out, go back to Oxford, see how it is, and do all this math in your head. Just too much effort, as proven by the fact that people don't do it. And we've realized that most of the key big weather apps were like this. BBC Weather will give you lots of detail about one location, but then you have to find that and find another location, again, do all this thing in your head. All the key big weather apps that we're competing with, none of them were making it quick and easy enough for people to just know what they need to know about the weather across several locations. And that became our opportunity of very first release of the Metaphys app. We literally did just that none of the other apps were doing, and we're very successful with it. So when other people around you are starting from feature ideas, you can ask, what situational struggle and desired outcomes are we designing for? And I will show you a way through the design process. And that was the first of it. The second habit is one that's useful in a slightly different situation. Have you ever been in a situation where you feel like what's really important in the project is to do something that's a bit like new and innovative, and you feel like maybe your colleagues or your clients, they will only pick the ideas that look they won't pick an idea that looks like it's been done before. Have you ever been in a situation like this where you feel there is a pressure to do something new, even maybe before you really understand what the actual user needs are? Or maybe there isn't time to understand the user needs, so you just try and believe you can just do something new and be successful. Does that happen to you? Yep. So when other people around you are trying to be innovative, when you feel that this is happening, then you can ask, how can we make it easier for people to go from the situational struggle to the desired outcomes? That's how you can reframe that. How can we make it easier for people to go from the situational struggle to the desired outcomes? And I want to show you an example of how we did this for Tesco Now. So Tesco Now, if you don't know about it, is express groceries delivery service. You get groceries delivered to your door within 30 minutes, and we helped Tesco design the app and part of the service a few years ago. It was really interesting because before we actually got involved, they had a pilot running through a third party. So we could actually talk to people before we started working. I mean, as we started working, we could already talk to people who had used really kind of the same service in a very roundabout way. Very useful. I must say, at the very beginning of this, when Tesco Now started, the delivery fees were quite high. I can't remember whether it was £8 or £6. If I'm honest, before I did the research with people who had used it, it really puzzled me that people would pay quite regularly £6 or £8 just to get groceries delivered to them very quickly. I did not understand why it would make sense to them. So we did do some research with people who had done it, and we realized that people were using Tesco Now in a range of situational struggle. So for example, it was worse than money when you're tired or low energy, or maybe you're struggling with too much to do, too little time. Or maybe you indoor, you just don't want to get out, it's cold outside, or raining, or maybe you're drunk. That was a very, very common one. Or maybe you're doing something, or you're entertaining guests and you're really in the flow. Or maybe you forgot something. You've not planned your party perfectly. And solving this is what it felt to them like it was worth the money to get something brought to them within 30 minutes. So I'll give you an example. One of these situation struggles that we heard a lot was something like this. I'm entertaining guests and we've just run out of something. And I'm feeling quite embarrassed. So it could have been alcohol. Or in another example, it was someone who, doing a barbecue on Sunday and they were in charge of bringing food for the kids and they realized they forgot to bring food for the kids. Feeling quite embarrassed, wanted to sort that out. So that's a situational struggle. And the sort of outcomes that people would be hoping to achieve are things like, my friends have a good time. They continue having a good time. They not feel that sort of embarrassment or shame that they felt. Also maybe look good or do something a bit fun. Now, in terms of how they could get from that situational struggle to the desired outcomes, there were a few different ways that typically few different strategies that typically use, products and services that typically use. They could, for example, go to the local off-license or supermarket, if they have a supermarket. Or they could do nothing, which they often did because maybe going to supermarket felt like too much effort. Or, recently they've been using Tesco Now. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And this is where you can start about the actual value of good user experience when it's really grounded in user needs. What decides whether something, what decides whether this person is going to be using this solution or that solution or that solution? What difference is a good user experience going to make? What parts of a good user experience would actually matter? What parts won't matter? That's where we can start to articulate really why we do something and why it's actually critical to do some other things. Otherwise you won't have customers. So there is a tool within this methodology that's very useful to do this. So let's look at the same situation. I'm entertaining guests and we've just run out of something and I'm feeling embarrassed. This is called a 4 forces diagram. And it basically says that there are 4 forces. Again, it's a simplification, but it says there are 4 forces that will, in the interplay, decide whether you will be sticking with your habitual way of doing things, the way you've always done things. In our example, it could be, going to the off-license, the supermarket, or whether instead you're going to try something new, something that you've not tried before. And in our case, that could be using Tesco Now. Now, this is not psychology. It's just a little framework that makes it useful to, say, collate lots of things that you've noticed in user interviews in a way that really helps you decide what you should be worrying about or not. So it basically says that there are 2 forces that make you want to just quit with the usual way of doing things and try something new, and 2 forces that actually keep you with the usual way of doing things. So first you have the struggles with the current way of doing things. So for example, the struggles that we heard about going to the off-license when you are in that situation are things like, well, if I go to the off-license, the range is going to be quite limited, and I really don't think the wine is going to be very good. Also, the weather is not so great in London sometimes, and so a lot of people said, I'm actually not feeling quite safe at 11 p.m. in my area. So all these things made them want to just either not go to off-license and just they were already in the market for something new. And then when they were using Tesco Now, the sort of things that they said, the outcomes they wanted to achieve by using it were things like, I really want to stay in the flow, and I really like that speed. It's just with us within 30 minutes, and we don't have to interrupt. No one is even going to notice the food is late. But then there were also other things that made them really hesitate for a long time before they actually end up using Tesco Now. Maybe make them hesitate before they try it again. Like in particular, a lot of potential customers said, we're really worried about the substitution error. So that's when you order an item from Tesco and then bring you something else. And they say, we thought you liked that instead because we didn't have the first thing you ordered. And often people were worried that the choices that Tesco make maybe are not the same. A turnip is not, whatever you call that other thing. It looks like it, but tastes very different. People were worried about the reliability of the service. 30 minutes? No, surely that's not going to work. It's not going to happen. Also worried about the cost. And there were also habits that people had built around this, going to the supermarket solution that kept them using it. For example, I've heard that a lot of people were waiting to be in a store to be inspired to know what to buy. Huh, that's interesting. Or, yeah, they really wanted to be able to choose the replacement items themselves. So understanding these things really helped us design, prioritize, make the right trade-offs when we design the app, and also some of the service features. And I'll show you a bit more about Tesco now in a moment. So when other people are trying to be innovative, when you see that this is happening, when it feels like it's about this project, it's about coming up with new ideas, then you can really help everyone by trying to reframe things just by asking, well, how can we make it easier for people to go from the situational struggle to the desired outcomes? And the way to make it easier might not be sexy at all, but that's the one that's going to matter. That's the one that's going to have a result. And the third habit is one that comes into play in a slightly different situation still. Have you ever been in a situation where you feel like the ideas, they're being judged based on what they look like? Or maybe if it's a concept, what the concepts sound like when you talk about it. Like, for example, that can happen if you see that designs are being reviewed on big screens, or that the client really wants that the designs are being reviewed like when they look flashy and beautiful, but actually there are lots of holes in the user experience. Has it happened to you that you feel like ideas really are judged a lot, or maybe too much based on how they look? One thing that I've been feeling incredibly passionate about, and is that, again, I was afraid of that situation, is to try and to turn that situation around and instead assess designs differently. So the question I would ask is, okay, well, how quickly and easily does our idea here take people from the situational struggle to the desired outcomes? What I mean here is that the idea is not worth nothing in itself, or the feature not interesting in itself, but it is a mechanism for people. It is a mechanism to get them from a situational struggle to the desired outcome. So in part, we can measure it. We can measure how effective it is using objective measures like time on task, for example, or other things, more than just someone's opinion and based on colors. I'll give you an example how I've done this on a previous project for dunnhumby. First, I need to tell you a tiny bit about dunnhumby, just so the example makes sense. So dunnhumby is essentially provides sales performance analytics to companies that make the products that we buy in supermarkets. So for example, to Warburton's, Coca-Cola, Nestle, and all the big brands. And for concretely, at Nestle, there will be a person who's called the account manager for Nescafe. What that means is that they are responsible for the sales of Nescafe at, say, Tesco. And the client at Tesco is called a buyer. And here's a situation struggle that we've heard a lot from these account managers. My buyer, so essentially they contact a Tesco who decides what to get bought by Tesco or not. My buyer just called me and said that our brand, Nescafe, is not doing well, and they want a solution ASAP. And so that's a really stressful situation. And the sort of outcomes that this account manager want to achieve is that, well, they really need to understand very quickly where sales are down. Is it in all regions? Is it just in some regions? Is it last week, or is it the past 6 months? Typically, the buyer won't tell them. It's a bit of a test for them to this person, the account manager, needs to be really on top of all that. It's actually really hard. So where are the sales down? Why are they down? And how to fix it? They want to really understand that very quickly so they can give an answer back to the buyer that's going to reassure the buyer. And so that the buyer is convinced that the brand is still in demand. The brand is still really healthy. No need to delist it. No need to reduce the prices. It's actually due to something else that we can fix straight away. In terms of, okay, what sort of things does an account manager do when they're in that situational struggle? Well, there are a few different solutions. One is that they could order a report through the old system, and they would go online, tick lots of boxes, very complicated, order a report and wait 14 hours until they get something. Then they see whether they find something interesting, and they realize they don't find interesting in that report, so maybe they order another report and wait another 14 hours. Doesn't really work, too long. Or they could brief a consultant, but that would take 4 days until they get an answer or something. They could just cave in and say, sorry, Mr. Buyer, or Miss Buyer, or Ms. Buyer, yeah, okay, I'm going to cave in negotiations, I'm going to just lower our margins. They don't want that. Or they could use a new tool that we were in charge of designing. And I must say, designing this new tool was very challenging. I struggled, it was difficult initially, because for 2 reasons. First is it was complex. It was a domain I did not understand. Lots of assumptions I was making, my clients were making. But also it was very difficult because we were talking to account managers, but they were telling us different things about what mattered to them. So it was actually really hard for us to know what trade-offs we should actually make, what trade-offs they would make if they were actually using a real interface. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that they were just looking, at basic prototypes, like Flinty prototypes, Marvel prototypes, that sort of things. They're not really completing a task, they're just looking at things that are a bit interactive. So it gives you lots of opinion, but it's based on what they say. We wanted to do more rigorous, task-based user testing, but we couldn't because we didn't have the right sort of prototypes. And also it was the beginning of the project, so we couldn't get time from engineers, and the client didn't really want to use engineering time to do this. So what I did is one day I built a functional enough prototype of that interface, of that mock-up that we had. And my goal here is that I wanted us to be able to make decisions based on how quickly and easy it would be for someone in that situation of struggle to get to that outcome. Literally know the time and know the success rate and see how they feel as they do it, as opposed to whatever they say, so that we could really see what actually helps people, what doesn't help people. Now, what I'm telling you here, and this is the big news, is that it was actually very quick to do. And the reason that it was quick to do is because I built the prototype, not like, if I had just briefed an engineer, I think they probably have built too much. And what I've done is build something that literally just will work for a very specific set of hypotheses that we're testing and one very specific user task. If you use the prototype, in the context of that user testing, where literally I tell a participant, imagine you're in this situation, you're Nescafe, your buyer calls you, blah, 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 tell me where the problem is and when you need to sort it. If you use the prototype to complete that task, you can use it for 10 minutes without realizing it's a prototype. But if you're using just to navigate, you'll be blocked within 2 seconds. So it was very quick because writing the hypothesis we want to test were very easy. It's literally this. Our hypothesis that OID makes it quick and easy to go from here to here. Boom, hypothesis written. The testing task that I had to write before the prototype was also very, very easy to write because it's literally this, with a bit more detail around it. Imagine in that situation, you want to achieve that outcome, you go and use a prototype, and I shut up and I just watch what happens. And then once we had these two things, it was very easy to build so little. It was completely smoke and mirrors, but it was very functional for that task. So I'm going to just play it very quickly. I'm going to play the animation of the video now. And it helps us figure out if you can play. Oh, sorry, I didn't play. You have to trust me. It helped us realize so many things, like lots of assumptions that we had baked into the concepts, like will someone notice that this dashboard is about a different brand if they want to do a Nescafe? Do they notice that they're in the wrong spot? Do they know how to change it easily? Do they know how this whole thing is architectured? And that really helped us. Basically, what it did for us is it completely changed the design process, because now twice a week we could get more rigorous, more objective data about whether our idea is working or not. And that meant that we spend a lot less time discussing opinions among us. So it really, really pays off, and it's really possible when people are judging ideas by how they look and how they sound to reframe this and ask, okay, we have an idea here. How quickly is it taking people from the situation of struggle to the desired outcomes? There was another project on Tesco Now where actually we didn't have any time to do any of that. So I used a slightly different method because I still want to do rigorous usability testing very, very early on. So I used a method called, I really don't know whether it's going to play.
So I also wonder how yeah, that's true. Do you want to text me and see what we should be before? I don't have any of the numbers. I've just emailed them to you.
The design method.
I gave them your number and I told them to
it means that
you
don't worry about layout, style. It doesn't matter how they look. What you want to do first. Like electronics, and you put electronics, plug in, you see if it works or not. It's very, very quick from a design perspective, but it's even so much quicker to then test it. You don't have to worry about CSS most of the time, and you can just focus on a particular thing that you want to test. In our case, it was about basket limits and that sort of stuff. That literally took me 2 hours. So it can be very, very quick to do if you're willing to sacrifice how things look and just focus on a particular hypothesis and task. So when people are judging ideas by how they look, reframe things and ask people, okay, how quick is it? How quickly does our idea take people from the situation of struggle to desired outcomes? You can also do that without prototypes just by taking a more sequential view of things. You know, it's not screen one, how does it look? It's more like what happens before, what happens after. And that's basically it. I'm very quickly going to recap, and then we can talk. So 2 key ideas. People don't want products, services, or features. Instead, people want to get from a situation of struggle to the desired outcomes. And focusing on product ideas makes design really, really hard, as I'm sure you've all experienced. But if you focus on the situation of struggle and desired outcomes, if you really focus on that first, it's really going to show you a way. You're going to discover a way as you go to successful design. And so when people are trying to start from feature ideas, ask the question, what situational struggle and the outcomes are we designing for? When people are trying to be innovative, ask, well, you know, what can we do that will make it quicker and easier for people to go from the situational struggle to the desired outcome? And when people are judging ideas based on how they look and how they sound, use a more objective measure, which is how quickly and easily does this idea take people from the situation struggle to the desired outcome? And that's it. And I also have a slide if you want to read more about all that. Thank you very much. So it took a bit longer than I was planning. We have a bit more than 10 minutes. I have time afterwards. Please, I'd love to hear all your questions, especially if you any questions, if you like something, if you don't like something, I want to know about it all. And I know we've used outcome-driven innovation here for a long time. I would like everyone to be clear about, you know, where does that come in, that sort of thing. So feel free to ask. David?
So you previously used the MAT model.
Yeah.
So the motivation, action, trigger.
It's ability trigger.
Ability trigger, yes. So how do you feel this plays in with that?
Yeah. So the different models are helpful. Different models or methods are helpful. Like different lenses or different tools are helpful. One doesn't replace each other, but they reveal some things and occlude other things. And the MAT model is it has some similarities, but it's more useful when you're looking at one particular interaction and you want to understand why is it that people are not doing it. And actually, all I've talked about here fits into the M motivation, really. Well, so mostly. This is like the main method I use to understand user needs. MAT model is more what I use to troubleshoot an interaction that people are not doing and understand why.
I know nothing about design. This seems like a really obvious good idea. Why do people do it? What's the alternative system?
It's a good question. So I think a lot of people say, yeah, we need to start from user needs. how often that really happens, how people are really, you know, user-centered. It depends. I think we could all share what we think the reasons are that sometimes people just build stuff without really de-risking whether that's actually the right solution for the right need. There are lots of reasons, but one thing I have noticed is that I think it's quite natural. I think that, well, I speak for myself. In my own life, I always think first in terms of solutions and features. And it actually takes a lot of discipline to then go, what's actually the need here? What is it that I'm actually trying to achieve? And especially if I'm really close to the problem, I really struggle to do it. And I think that that's why we can be so helpful and powerful by helping rephrase and reframe the conversation. Everyone when a client comes and say, we need to do this, I go, great, thank you very much. Now I want to really, Mr. Client or Miss Client or Miss Client, I really want to understand you better. I'm gonna talk to you until I really understand all the outcomes you're trying to achieve and what situation you're in. Until you feel like I really got you and you're not attached to the specific solutions anymore. Nick?
Yeah, it's like working on our pitches and reading briefs that like clients or potential clients almost always frame what they're looking for in terms of features. Like how do you think we can do a better job at early in that engagement? Either pushing back or as I said, reframing it. Basically to say you're wrong, but not to say you're wrong.
So there are three things I try to do. The first thing is that I try to start projects with workshops that embody this method. Sometimes I give the talk, gets people excited. Sometimes the first time we meet someone on an actual project, I try and start in this way and get people to really express as a group of all stakeholders the outcomes that the business wants to achieve and also the business's understanding of the situational struggle that they want to address for customers and the outcomes that the customers want to achieve. And what I found is that to an extent, often people come with a specific idea and once they have all, you know, the ultimate outcomes on the wall that they've all agreed with it, they really feel less pressured about the ideas. That really does help. Another thing I do is that on a project, when people talk about the next feature and things, then I try and reframe it. So for example, on Ford, you know, there was an epic and it was like, okay, we have 2 weeks now to design social features. And we spend lots of time in workshops, social features, what should it be? What does everyone else do? Lots of expensive people in expensive workshops trying to bring some social features. And then we ask ourselves, well, we realized really when I asked questions that what was going on is that the client had never done an app before. They were doing a service. It's really daunting and they want to make sure they do it right. And social felt like such an important topic. What they really wanted to achieve were two things. One is feeling like they're really doing a good job designing a service and also making sure that people, when they rent a car, they don't leave it in a dirty state or something or in the wrong place. So once you know exactly what people are trying to achieve, then you don't necessarily have to do anything. Turns out it was not a problem at all. People did not leave cars in the wrong places or in a dirty state. So that anxiety never materialized. And us, by having done this thinking exercise, the client could prove that considered it. And it cost zero in terms of development effort. So we also try and do this. And the third thing I try and do is to get the feedback loop with users, like task-based user testing very, very early on, so that we get back in touch with reality a bit more than just what we imagine would be important to people or not. That's what I try and do. Talia? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so that's what I was referring to earlier. So as I mentioned to you, after Clay Christensen and Bob Mosta coined the phrase, a lot of other people started using the same jobs to be done title with quite different methods. And you'd hear things like, the jobs to be done is to put songs in your iPod. Sounds like a task, sounds like an activity. So really there are two key school of thought. Some people use jobs to be done with a method that's got activities and tasks at the core, and they analyze these activities and tasks, and they look at outcomes for these activities and tasks, but the core is the activity and the task. The activity and task already tell you partly what the solution should be. That's one method. And that's what people sometimes call jobs as activities. This is jobs as progress. And this is really what I'm trying to say. I didn't want to say jobs as progress here because then everyone is confused. What I want to say is that it literally boils down to this. People are in situational struggle. They want to get the outcomes that they're imagining that they want. That's it. And I don't want to use the word progress. I don't want to use the word jobs. It's literally just that. And that, I think, is the method that's a bit newer than all the other things because, as you know, task analysis is not new at all. It's great, but it's not new at all. This, I think, is a bit newer.
When it comes to prioritizing all the different, for example, struggles, what methods have you used in the past? Is it the quantitative that you try to turn into some quantitative, say, many people seem to be struggling with this, therefore, by resolving that pain point might in the first 2 weeks, for example?
Yeah. So two things. I don't feel like I've really, I don't have the silver bullet here, but there are a couple of things. First, I think what I'm just talking to you about here works well at a pretty zoomed out level. When you're looking at a level of product and you should be able to say, after some research about why people are purchasing and using it, you should be able to say, we're doing 4 key things in people's life. 4 key situational struggles, and these are outcomes that we're addressing. There's a really good example from the people at Basecamp in this blog article. It literally says Basecamp is doing these 4 things for people. And so it's a limited number. If you try and list 100 or 120, then you're more thinking about activities. And then I'd recommend use a slightly different method. That's the first thing. Now, the other thing is that generally when you have like a small number like this, it should be, then you can use that it becomes your positioning. Like, Basecamp, for example, realized through this exercise that they're not project management software. They are, the way they define the positioning is not as project management. It's, we're the best tool at helping people in this 4 situational struggle. And that's the positioning. And once they've decided this, then they could decide, oh, actually, we're not going to do synchronous document editing. We're going to do purely asynchronous. We're not going to do upload native files. We're just going to upload PDF and that sort of things. And it helps them do that. I think a lot of the other prioritization frameworks, like the RICE model, I think could probably also help with situational struggle. I should think about that a bit more. I don't know. We should talk about it together. Great. Anything else? Yes.
And just in terms of the team, like trying to take that simple framework of what is your struggle, what are you trying to get to, help people unblock themselves from thinking that it's a certain way of having to discover.
Yeah, exactly. So I find that's really fascinating. Does anyone do nonviolent communication or consensus processes, like if you've lived in a co-op or something? So it's the same stuff. So people will come. So for example, my fiance used to live in a co-op. Every Tuesday evening, they spend the whole evening discussing agenda items for the co-op. Like it'd be 6 or 8 people. So everyone would come with a topic they want to discuss. And maybe in the first 10 minutes of discussing a topic, people would generally make demands or say they want this and not that. And then it was the job of the group to help everyone manage to articulate what is it that they're actually needing? Is it safety? Is it consultation? What is it that they're actually needing? And to help someone articulate that, you actually need to help them. And that's really the same that I suggest we do for clients. You don't assume they're wrong. You just really listen to them until you, as much as you can really understand the need is behind it. Once you manage to articulate it, you should see something like, or at least in personal relationships, that's what I see. When people feel they really are understood, then they let go a bit more off. specific strategies that they had in mind to meet the needs. So it's the same thing. I really agree. That's why I find it so interesting. Yeah. Great. Thanks so much. Thank you very much.